The University of the Philippines is the country's national university. This premier institution of higher learning was established in 1908 and is now a university system composed of 7 constituent universities and 1 autonomous college spread throughout 15 campuses in the archipelago. The University of the Philippines Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga brings the UP standard of education, research, and extension work to the busiest and fastest growing places in Central Luzon, the Clark Freeport Zone and the Subic Freeport Zone. But the road to excellence did not start out as smooth. In 1979, the then UP Extension Program in San Fernando, Pampanga was first lodged in a shabby building at the Jose Abad Santos High School in Barangay Lourdes, San Fernando, Pampanga, and then moved to its second home, the historical old Pampanga High School building near the provincial capital. Its beginning was already marked by a cascade of challenges. When Mount Pinatubo erupted on June 15, 1991, it covered the whole building in a blanket of ash. 4 years later, rampaging Lahar floods brought by Typhoon Mameng engulfed San Fernando, including the entire campus. It was because of this that the university had to find a temporary campus for its beleaguered UP-EP-SFP. Incredibly, its stakeholders took heart. Students, armored with dreams of greener fields beyond their present miseries, persisted. Faculty members soldiered on with minimal complaints. Parents plainly just pinned their hopes for their children's future on a UP education. In April of 1998, by way of Presidential Proclamation 163 of then-President Fidel Ramos, a Memorandum of Agreement was signed by the Basis Conversion Development Authority, the CDC, and UP, stating that UP may relocate within the Clark Special Economic Zone. This unexpected turn gave the unit a warm flush of feeling at the time it was about to give up rather than to press on, even as the unit was renamed UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga. After over a decade of homelessness, UP in Pampanga was to have a permanent home. On August 22, 2014, the UP DEPP community came together to witness and celebrate the inauguration of the first of 2 academic buildings in the new campus. The inauguration heralded the ascending mode of the unit's evolution towards the full attainment of its dream, being a university town which will serve as the intellectual capital for both regional and international networks, a place where aspirations in various dimensions of life will find fulfillment. With its strategic location in Clark, more programs are underway to create worldwide reach, yet instilling the same integrity and values of the UP standard of excellence.
How do you make a great decision? First, you have to understand. Next, you consider what you know. And then, and only then, you act. We believe that the best decisions depend on the best data. The data that enhances your expertise and gives you the power to act, so you can get ahead and stay there. That's what we do at Nielsen IQ. When you join us, you'll join the brightest and the most dedicated minds in the industry to challenge what's possible, connect dots that others can't see, and transform entire sectors globally. You'll work at an organization that's fully invested in its new chapter, accelerating progress and building solutions that shape entire markets. Helping the world's biggest brands and retailers make their most important decisions isn't easy, but it's always rewarding. Now it's time for your decision. Do you want to access unrivaled expertise and endless opportunities? Do you want to change the landscape? Theirs, ours, yours. Explore career opportunities at Nielsen IQ. How do you
Great afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the University of the Philippines Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga, the UP Diliman Extension Program in Olongapo, and Nielsen IQ Philippines, allow me to welcome all of you to today's webinar entitled Data Analytics for Business. This endeavor is an institutional extension activity of the UP Depo in partnership with one of the leading big data and measurement companies in the country, Nielsen IQ. Before we begin with the webinar proper, let us all honor the Philippine flag by joining the UP Pampanga Chorale in singing the national anthem.
Bayang mag-ibig, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, luya ng pag-ibig, sa manlulupig, di ka masisig. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit bumaga, may ilang tula at awit sa paglayang yaman. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdidinig, ang bituin ng araw niya kailan pa may nakikinig. Lupa ng araw na maraming pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang bigaya ng pagpapalaki, ang matay ng dahil sa'yo.
To lead us in singing praises to our Creator, here is one of our esteemed professors of philosophy, Professor Tony Villasor, in his rendition of Arnel de Panos' Dakilang Katapatan.
Sadyang kay buti ng ating Panginoon, magtatapat sa habang panahon, maging sa kabila ng aking pagkukulang, biyaya niya'y patuloy na lang. Katulad ng pagsinag ng gintong araw, patuloy siyang nagbibigay tanglaw. Kaya sa puso ko't damdamin, katapatan niya'y aking pupurihin. Dakila ka, O Diyos, tapat ka ngang tunay, magmula pa sa ugat ng aming lahi. Mundo'y magunaw man, maasahan kang lagi, maging hanggang wakas nitong buhay. Kaya, Diyos, aking pupurihin, buong mundo aking awitin. Dakila ang iyong katapatan, pag-ibig mo'y walang hanggan. Dakila ka, O Diyos, tapat ka ngang tunay, magmula pa sa ugat ng aming lahi. Mundo'y magunaw man, maasahan kang lagi, maging hanggang wakas nitong buhay. Dakila ka, O Diyos, sa habang panahon, ay nasandigan. Sa bawat bighati, tagumpay man ay naroon. Daluyan ng pag-asa kung kailangang hinahon. Pag-ibig mo'y alay sa amin noon hanggang ngayon. Dakila ka, O Diyos. Dakila ka, O Diyos.
Thank you very much for that wonderful song of praise, Sir Tony. And now, to welcome everyone joining us today in this webinar, here is Dr. Purisima Pandilio, the Director of UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga and the UP Diliman Extension Program in Olongapo. Dr. Pandilio.
Thank you, Prof. Eunice. Good afternoon, everyone. It is with great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, an extension service activity between the University of the Philippines extension programs in Pampanga and Olongapo in collaboration with the Nielsen IQ Philippines. This webinar aims to introduce and enlighten us about data analytics, what is it, and why it matters, how it helps organizations harness their data and use it to identify new opportunities. Having the skills required to work with data is said to be not just valuable, but a necessity, as these skills are going to become indispensable in the future as more industries and businesses, even SMEs, adopt data analytics. One of our speakers will discuss how data analytics is used for making better business decisions. So this will surely benefit the business owners and organizations representatives who are with us today in this webinar. There is also a need to focus on data analytics in higher education as more businesses and even the non-business sectors start working with big data. There will surely be a huge demand for graduates with analytic skills and potential to work as data analysts. It is a must then that educators should push for its inclusion in their academic programs. This may even become a common core subject in the near future. Our other speaker will talk about careers in data analytics, what skills the industry needs. This webinar, therefore, will be beneficial to our colleagues in the higher education and our students as well. So today in this webinar, let's learn about how data is used by organizations. Let's learn about data analytics. Again, good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Panlilio, for that very warm welcome to our registrants. And before we proceed, allow me to gently remind all participants to please follow these guidelines while the webinar is ongoing. For questions you would like to raise to our speakers, please make use of the Q&A button or our chat box. There is a specific portion of the webinar allotted for answering these queries. A certificate of attendance will be forwarded to those who will provide feedback as an evaluation of this webinar. The QR code and link to the form will be given at the latter part of the program. Lastly, to show active participation, please feel free to tell our speakers how you think or feel about their talk by using the reactions buttons in your Zoom panel. Please do not be stingy with your heart or applause reactions. So, why don't we give it a try? To signify your readiness to listen to our speakers, may I please see some hearts or applause reactions from the audience? All right, thank you very much, our dear and enthusiastic participants. And now, let me introduce you to these two gentlemen who will be sharing with us their experiences and expertise in data analytics. First, we have the Regional Executive Director leading the Analytics and Insights team of Nielsen IQ here in Asia, Mr. Craig Hewliston. Craig has a management degree from Aston University in the United Kingdom. He started his career in Nielsen, UK in 2008, and for the last decade has been based here in Asia. 7 of those years he spent building relationships for Nielsen and some of the world's biggest manufacturers while in China, and the remaining 3 were spent focused on regional analytics and insights. Craig has recently completed the Oxford University Artificial Intelligence Program too. Later, he will be sharing about careers in data analytics, what skills the industry needs. With him is Mr. Pocholo Castro, who, as an associate director at Nielsen IQ Philippines, helps local and emerging clients identify business opportunities through the use of data. Prior to Nielsen IQ, Poch has an extensive background in FMCG, or fast-moving consumer goods, and food service with top manufacturers such as Unilever, NutriAsia, and Kraft Heinz. His experience in these conglomerates proved to be very helpful in helping his clients achieve best-in-class market findings. Personally, Poch inspires himself with a quote from Arthur C. Nielsen that goes, "The price of light is less than the price of darkness." He will be discussing the topic data analytics for better business decisions. So, without further ado, here are Craig and Poch. Kindly welcome them generously by clicking on those reactions or expressing your sentiments in the chat box. The floor is yours, Craig and Poch.
Thank you very much. Just share my screen. I need access to share the screen. It says disabled. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can see the screen. So it was lovely seeing all those videos, especially the history of the University of the Philippines. So the University of the Philippines is 114 years old. At Nielsen IQ, actually, we're 99 years old. So we're only slightly younger than the University of the Philippines. And actually, then next year is a very special year for us because it'll be our 100-year anniversary. So similar to, Poch was inspired by Arthur C. Nielsen, who was our founder. And actually 99 years ago, Arthur C. Nielsen, he was a businessman and an engineer in Chicago in the United States. And he had this idea of trying to go around different stores around Chicago. And what he used to do was he would ask the storekeepers how much Coca-Cola they sold and how much Pepsi-Cola they sold. And then he'd go to another store and ask the same, and then he'd go to another store accordingly. And actually, Arthur Charles Nielsen created the concept of market share. So we're a very innovative company because our founder was the person who created market share. And that's a key fundamental in terms of how businesses depict their success and growth around the world. And we are the founders of it. So it's a real privilege to share more about how Nielsen IQ and data has evolved and how this will be one of the key opportunities in the future. So we'll be sharing 2 parts. So I'll kick off by just starting a bit more about the history of Nielsen IQ and what we do, just so that people get to know a bit more. And then I'll hand over to Poch, who'll share more about data analytics for better business decisions. And then I'll share more about careers in data analytics and what skills are needed in this industry. So perhaps you see these types of advertisements. Perhaps it's on your social media, perhaps it's on the bus, it's on television, or in the newspaper. And you'll see these often. And obviously, these companies around the world are all trying to vie to try to get consumers to buy their products. So perhaps have a look at this and think to yourself, what would entice you to buy cream silk from these advertisements? Perhaps you might be thinking about, is it the varieties of products they have, the wording they're using in the adverts, the colors, etc. And actually data's behind the whole of it. Nielsen IQ actually helps a lot from the concept into the execution. However, the most powerful way for advertisers to try to get consumers to buy their brand is the #1 claim. You will often see it on social media, on television. And you can see Unilever here have used this to say this is the #1 conditioner in the Philippines. And the reason being is that when you have that strong brand equity, people want to buy a trusted brand. They believe that it's successful, it's good. If other people are buying it, then I must buy it. However, Unilever will only know their own sales. They will not know the sales of Procter & Gamble or Henkel, etc. And thus you need a trusted data partner to do that. And thus, whenever you look at the #1 claim, whether it's in the Philippines or in the US or Europe, etc., just look at the source at the bottom and you'll see it's the Nielsen IQ data. And again, this is why data is so powerful in terms of fast-moving consumer goods and how people make decisions. So ask yourself a question. When you think about data and information, what comes to your mind? Perhaps you may be thinking that there's so much data out there. Data is very complex. Maybe you're also thinking of things such as how much trust do we have in data, data integrity, the safety of having your data out there. And actually Nielsen IQ is such a powerful company because we are the third party and trusted by retailers and manufacturers. You can also think to yourself about how do we use data and information to make decisions. Perhaps when you decided to join the University of the Philippines, you would have used data to make that decision, to know that this is the right university for me or the right course to take. Perhaps when you're planning a trip or making a purchase, etc., you will be using data and information. And as we have stated before, data is going to be more and more prevalent. So having skills in understanding data and transforming data into action is going to be one of the most powerful jobs that you can have over the coming years and decades. So let me share a bit more about Nielsen IQ. So you know that we're 99 years old, but we'll just play a video so you can learn more about what we do. So what I like about that video is that the statement that we are crafting powerful stories from complex data. So we're able to do that because we're a leading global information services company. So we really focus on having very innovative product offerings and modern technology. And what we do is we try to drive a lot of value for consumer packaged goods, customers, retailers. And we do that by being the independent third party. Essentially, we have a currency globally for fast-moving consumer goods companies to make decisions. So as a company, I've mentioned that we are 99 years old. We're actually also headquartered in Chicago, which is where Arthur Charles Nielsen founded the company. And actually, we're present in over 90 countries around the world, and we have over 30,000 employees. So again, as it was mentioned in the introduction, I've been very lucky that I started my career in the UK, and then I moved to China, and then I moved to Singapore. And that's one of the great things about working at Nielsen IQ is that you get the opportunity to work all around the world with our data. So in terms of what we do, we primarily support decisions that drive industry decision making. So again, as we mentioned, we work with fast-moving consumer goods companies. So just for benefits of people who are not familiar with this industry, that's the likes of Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Nestle, local manufacturers like San Miguel, Del Monte. We also work with retailers, whether it be Walmart, Lazada, Sari stores, etc. We collect all the data. And you have to remember, actually, where we get our information primarily is through our partnership with the retailers. So again, we talked about trustworthiness of data. The fact is that we have access to all the data because the retailers trust us with their data, and then we share it back to the whole of the industry. We also collect data with consumers through either our home scan panel or also things such as consumer insight surveys. And what we essentially do is we measure what is happening, where it's happening, when it's happening, and by who. And really what we add the most value is the diagnosis of why. And from the diagnosis of why, we really help companies make better decisions to help drive further growth. So with that, I'll just hand over to my colleague Poch, who'll be sharing more about what we uncover at Nielsen IQ.
Yep. Thank you, Craig. I will try to share my screen. So, okay. Okay, so I believe my screen is being shared now. So thank you, Craig, and thank you, UP team, for having us here. And so just like what Craig mentioned, data is very important. Data is very important in our everyday lives, even in the simplest and the most basic things that or key things that you have to do personally. You have to use data before you make a decision, whether which is the fastest way to go to the school, or should I buy this, should I not buy this, will I need this, will I not need this. You need data to support your decisions. So is businesses, and that's what actually we do in Nielsen IQ. We provide the data that could be the supporting information for our clients to decide on their business concerns. So probably to make this a bit more exciting, let's make a role playing out of the next few slides that we're going to share. So imagine yourselves to be an investor or to be a business owner, and you're kind of at a loss. Do I want to invest in the Philippines? Do I want to invest elsewhere? It's been a lot of unprecedented changes with the pandemic, with calamities. I don't want to run in blind and probably lose my capital. So I want to understand, how can I start, or where can I start? And that leads us to this next slide. So probably let's take a look at first how the market in Asia Pacific is. So here you would see growth in terms of value and volume across fast-moving consumer goods. So probably for a bit more context, when we say FMCG or fast-moving consumer goods, it's pretty much the things that you buy in a supermarket, in a sari-sari store, in a market stall, or any other familiar stores that you usually buy to. So here you would see, okay, I'm an investor. I want to try to look at where do I invest. Oh, Myanmar is the fastest growing market in terms of value. That's 17.5%. Is it a good choice to go there? But if you would look at on the other column, while Myanmar is growing very aggressively, Myanmar's volume growth is actually slowing down. So what does this mean? It means that the growth is actually most likely or significantly coming from an inflation environment or high prices, to which, while they're being charged for much more, since the consumer demand, the paying consumer wouldn't have much budget, hence a slowdown in terms of what they buy in terms of quantity. So you see the dynamics there, that how do I want to invest in Myanmar? Probably not. probably I might look into a different market elsewhere. So probably let's take a look at our own Philippines. Philippines here is growing 12%, very healthy, double digit in terms of value. But if you would look at how our volume is growing, it's at 9.3%. So it's not that far off. So what does it mean by just looking at this chart? It means that while we might be having products priced a bit more higher, probably being brought about by our current economic situation, the inflation, as we are all familiar with, the demand is there because the demand is still growing almost as significant as value. So what does that mean? It means that if I'm going to place my product in this market, chances are I would get or attract demand, because as a total across this category of products, demand is growing from both value and volume. And here, if we would look at the other markets, they're also growing significantly in terms of value, but relatively slower in volume. So probably it's also an inflationary market. And at the same time, probably they are the markets that are still struck with the pandemic. As you might have noticed, around 2022 or late 2021 onwards, we're starting to ease up in our being restricted or being quarantined in our homes. So some offices actually have started to go back to the office. I'm sure most of us are suspects to this. Every weekend we go to the mall, or probably some of you might have already started watching a movie, probably with a date or with a family member. And that actually collectively drives what we see in terms of growth here for Philippines in terms of value and also volume. So okay, so it seems that Philippines might be a good place to start. So probably let's see, where do I want to place my products in, right? So the next slide now will actually paint a picture how relevant each store is in terms of demand, in terms of value sales. So we will focus a bit more on the leftmost side and also on the center data. So here you would see the three stack columns. This is actually contribution growth in terms of value across the past 3 years, or the past 3 periods, if I may. And here are some color coding and how it's growing versus last year and versus pre-pandemic. So probably in a nutshell, the first thing that we will look at, supermarkets would be always king. Yes, it's always king. And that's actually the big chunk here that you would see in terms of a gray color. But something to note here is that the share is actually starting to dwindle or starting to fluctuate in favor of the other smaller format stores. In fact, if you would compare 2021 versus 2020, for supermarkets, it's actually a bit lower, and even significantly lower back in pre-pandemic times. So what does this mean? I will tell you later. But if you would look at, on the other hand, the other smaller format stores, such as convenience stores, drug stores, or even the traditional trade, sari-sari stores. When we say traditional trade, it's a mix of sari-sari stores, market stalls. You would see there's significant growth. So why is that happening? Before, during the pandemic, when everything's just pretty much locked up, even ourselves are locked in our homes, the only best way to go to shop around for your essentials is the supermarket, because they're the only ones open, and they're also the only ones that might carry much of the products that you need. That's 2020. Then as we ease up to the quarantine procedures of this market in the Philippines, we start to go out, we start to be confident without masks, and then we can already even do the things that we can't do before, such as like leisure travel. The smaller format stores that used to be closed back then are starting to become a bit more active. And why? Because people now can go around. Convenience is important when people go around. The proximity to their household is also important to go around. And all the more, these stores might be actually price competitive in terms of what they can offer to the consumers. And to validate that, when we ask consumers, what do they look for in choosing a store to buy from? Number one is value for money. So if it will save me the gas, it will save me commute, if it will save me other expenses, and even get a lower price for these kinds of products, then this is the store for me. And if you would see, value for money and low prices are the top two considerations of consumers. Before, it's just the wide product range, the wide assortment is important. Probably they're in the number 2 or the number 1, but now you would see it's a number 3 and has pretty much the same weight as price. And if you would notice, and I'm sure most of us would have noticed this, if you go through convenience stores or drug stores, there's a lot of assortment already. So for those who actually be a beverage lover, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, you would see that in convenience stores, they're starting to sell products, or you look at the refrigerator, they will start to sell products that won't even have English written on it. Like, Japanese brands coming in. And in fact, one brand to note, Glico. Glico, who's actually been quite dormant. So if you would be familiar with the brand Pocky biscuit. So before they were a bit hesitant to come into the market and just sell their pricey biscuits. But now they came into the market selling their pricey biscuits and even adding a bit more variation, healthy pricey biscuits, made of wheat, high fiber. And it's because people are starting to look for more variety in smaller format stores because number one, it's nearer to them. Number two, the convenience, and also they could even probably get it lower in these stores compared to the bigger stores. So, and if you would notice, the weight of each consideration is pretty much close to each other. Compared, probably if you would ask us back in 2019 or 2018, the contribution of each might be different or significantly different from each other. So in a nutshell, are we saying supermarkets not the way to go? Of course not. They're still the bigger chunk of the pie. But if you're an investor and you want to reach more, you probably might want to consider also looking at the other smaller format stores that are growing in this market. But again, that will be a case-to-case basis depending on what kind of product you might be selling. So we've now known where to invest, which stores to attack. Let's probably look at what other worries you, the CEO, might be actually thinking about, keeping you restless at night. So now it's 2022, and since 2020, there has been a lot of unprecedented challenges, headwinds, or whatever adjective you want to call it that happened to us. COVID, monkeypox, inflation, energy crisis due to the war, and even at some point, some fear that, World War III might pop out. So all these things are actually also in the mind of an investor or a manufacturer. In fact, we did ask CEOs across Asia Pacific what keeps them awake at night. So number one here, you would see at 28% is the rising cost of raw goods and materials. Probably to give you an anecdote. So I actually just came from a meeting with a client, and he was saying, business is good. Business is good, but did you know that onions now sells 200 pesos a kilo just because of the storm? And that impacts my margins. And I can't raise my prices because no one will want to buy me, but I won't have margins anymore because I have to pay a very expensive business overhead to keep my products out there in the market. And in fact, that's not only one manufacturer, it's almost all manufacturers operating in the Philippines. For another example would be most of the products that you use would actually have packaging materials coming from China. So back then, when there was a Shanghai lockdown, the packaging materials cannot travel here, hence exuberant prices they charge the clients. But since they can't charge it to the consumer, they have to accept the impact of that lessening or impacting their business margin. So another is low recovery of consumption. It's just now that we started to become a bit more active, going out, starting to try things that we used to try before the pandemic. So compared to other markets, it has been quite active already. So that's also an impact, significantly impacting the demand. Hence the other things that you would see here would actually keep them busy at night. And in fact, understanding this will actually enable them to make business decisions that will either sustain their business or open the gates of doom for their establishment. So here is some important biggest concerns back for 2022, according to the consumers, particularly the CEOs. So here you see COVID's still there. There are still new variants coming in. If you just stay tuned with CNN and the other international news, there's a lot of variants coming in and out. Businesses, so inflation due to the energy crisis, calamities impacting distribution of raw materials and even availability of raw materials, altogether impacting what we can use to create products and then also manage the prices of the products that we sell to our consumers. And of course, consumers, given that probably the wages doesn't increase that much, but the prices increase that significantly, their ability to spend is actually also a worry of manufacturers out there. So this is all what keeps the boss, such as you, in our role playing awake at night. Probably let's try to understand a bit more what's happening to our consumers now. So 2022 across Asia Pacific, we've identified a couple of unique motivators or unique motivations of each consumers. So here we would see thrivers at 6%. When we say thrivers, these are the guys that actually get to save money, feeling a bit more financially secure, and probably if you would go around, they might be the folks that you see that starts to renovate their houses, starts to buy a new car, or probably drives a vehicle that wouldn't have their plate numbers yet. So because they were able to save, they still get to enjoy the life that they used to have, and at the same time, spend the money some more. That's 6% across Asia Pacific. Unchanged. So these are the guys that are still in status quo. So I have my money, I have a financial stability. I could buy, I could spend the usual things I have. I do. And not a bit worried about the financial stability that I have. That's 12%. And if you would look at the whole bar, they're just a very small chunk that are not that worried. 12 plus 6. The rest, as you would see, are starting to get a bit more worried. And I'm sure one or a couple, or at some point in our lives, we are one of these, right? So 38%, the cautious, they're not that financially impacted. They have the means to sustain their living, but they're starting to be a bit more worried about their environment. For example, I can still buy what I used to buy, but it's starting to get a bit more expensive. So now the question pops behind my head. Can I still buy this in the next 3 months, 6 months, or probably in a year? So Or do I have to change my spending strategy or my consumption strategy? So before, probably I am using a very expensive micellar cleanser for my face. But now probably I'm not sure if this inflation stays here. And probably the peso US exchange might hit 60s. Maybe I would just go to my basic astringent. So as a resort. So that's the 38%. 21% on the other hand might feel a bit cautious in their spending, but they're a bit more courageous because they just got themselves back on their feet. So who are these folks? Probably these are the households that might have a COVID member, a member of the household afflicted by COVID, but now then recovered, probably lost their job back last year, but now has a new job or even a better job, and starting to kick back from the slump that they had a couple of years back since the pandemic started. So who are these folks? They might be buying a bit more indulgences, but they're also cautious because they're not that out of the woods yet, but they now have the means to get out of the woods. So that's 21% in Asia Pacific. And sadly, there are this 23% in Asia Pacific that we call strugglers. So these are the guys that are on their year 2 of the challenge of the headwind. They might have suffered financial instability back then and still suffering the financial instability today. So who are these guys? These are the guys that might focus on essentials. So probably before I'm buying 100% Angus corned beef. Now I'm just buying Carabao beef, corned beef. Or probably I'm buying Portuguese Spanish sardines, but now I'm buying just the tomato red sardines. So these are the guys that will try to make ends meet because they are in survival mode. And in Asia Pacific, they are 23%. So to those here in the Philippines, we all know much of us are in the challenge mode. We are not alone. Across Asia Pacific, numbers are also significant. And now we had in our quick role playing an understanding where to invest, who's who, which store to prioritize, and which are the consumers that we will be facing. And that's the type of data that we collaborate and exchange and grow with clients every day. And with that, I turn you over to Craig. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poch. So I'll just share again. So hopefully, Nielsen IQ's already sold on you, especially after listening to Poch. I feel really energized and excited about working at Nielsen IQ. But if not, we have one final push just to share more about why this is a really fantastic organization to work with. So essentially at Nielsen IQ, we are looking for people who do have a passion for data and information. And just to share with you, when I was at university, I didn't have a passion for data information. So if you don't have that passion for data information, then don't worry. But we are looking for people who are looking to develop and to really grow and are inquisitive and want to really turn data into insights and stories. So again, that's one of the key things about working at Nielsen IQ is you're presenting in front of the biggest companies in the world and some of the smallest as well. And what you have to do is really try to transform quite complex data, but into stories which can really craft strategies and change. And it's not just for people who are highly analytical. We also want very strong interpersonal people who are able to communicate and collaborate and really constantly want to develop and learn, because essentially that's what you have the great opportunity at Nielsen IQ to do. So if I just share a bit more about what Nielsen IQ does in terms of investing, maybe I'll just start off by sharing more about where it all starts with, and that's professional development and training. So one of the great things at Nielsen IQ in the Philippines is that we actually have our regional analytics and insights center based in Manila. So actually, over the past 6 months, we've had over 100 people join our organization, graduates from universities, including the University of the Philippines, and they all go through the best-in-class training and development. So actually, for the first 2 months of their career, they go into training both in terms of learning how to analyze data, how to pull data using Nielsen IQ's proprietary software, but also things such as soft skills in terms of how to build your presentation skills, how to develop your time management, etc. And actually, once they start becoming more client-facing, the training doesn't end. So again, I've been very privileged to have a 15-year career at Nielsen IQ. I would say that it's a constant learning journey. Nowadays we have a lot of great opportunities, such as the company invests in LinkedIn Learning. We have external speakers. We have opportunities for big leaders are constantly sharing. So it really is a fantastic place to learn. I would also state that there's a great network to learn from. So whether it's internally or externally, you learn a lot. So again, there are many people who have, a lot of my leaders have 20 years, 30 years experience at Nielsen IQ. There are people who come from external organizations who bring a breath of fresh air. We learn a lot from our clients as well. So Poch and myself, we have the pleasure to talk to some of the biggest companies in the world and some of the fastest growing companies in the world. And we learn from them in terms of what they are doing and how they are winning in the market. Another thing to mention is that there is a varied career opportunities. So again, we focus a lot about our retail measurement and consumer panel. But actually within Nielsen IQ, we have teams who focus on innovation. So again, go to your supermarket, look at what's the new launch from Unilever or Coca-Cola or Del Monte. They have used Nielsen IQ data to make that decision. They have done concept testing with consumers to find out what is the pricing to do, why they chose that flavor, why they chose that price, etc. We have consumer insights departments who do things such as focus group, qualitative, quantitative. We have econometric modelists who start analyzing store level data to decide whether a product should increase their price by 3% or 4%, and what is the impact of that. We have data scientists who are ensuring that our data is the most robust and highest quality and integral data out there. So again, we have a vast array of different opportunities within our organization. And even if you start in one area, you can move to another. That's one of the great things. I'd also like to penultimately share about mentorship. I think that one thing that I've been very fortunate throughout my career at Nielsen IQ is I've been able to develop because the company has invested in mentors for me. So again, it's people who are able to share their wisdom, have an external perspective. We also have reverse mentorship, where we get to learn from more younger people who are able to share their perspective, because we have a very open culture in this organization. Again, within the Manila Regional Center, the people who are leading our workplace engagement are all graduate people. If you put it for an old person like me, I'm probably going to start putting a VHS machine or DVD player. I'm so out of touch, whereas the young people are doing all these really creative ideas in terms of really fun and interactive games to drive it. So we do have that culture within the organization. And last but not least is that multicultural country exposure. So again, I can just share from that personal perspective. I've been very fortunate to work across 3 markets. When I was in the UK, I went to my HR and said, one day I would like to move to China. Within a week, they told me, you can move to China. Okay. When I asked the company that I wanted to move to Singapore, a few days later, they said, you can move to Singapore. I'm not saying that can always happen, but it does happen. And I've been very fortunate to do that. And one of the great reasons comes back to what I started with on this slide, which is professional development and training. Is that actually at Nielsen IQ, you learn how to analyze data the best way. You get taught how to be professional in terms of how to engage with a CEO of a big company. And even though I didn't speak Chinese, I was able to move to China because I knew how to analyze data. And those skills are highly transferable. So again, that's one of the great things about working at Nielsen IQ, is that the way that we analyze data is the industry norm, which is a fantastic thing and a very great thing that we're privileged to have. So again, just a few other things just want to share is that actually, as we mentioned, we do work that matters. So again, one thing that you may not realize is that if you work at Procter & Gamble or Nestle, etc., your bonus is based on Nielsen IQ data. So your targets, so that's why they get very angry with our data. Sometimes they will challenge us because their bonuses are based on it, because it's independent. It's an independent third-party assessment. It's comparative. P&G may be growing 10%, but if Unilever is growing 15%, they will lose share, potentially. So this is why our work is very important. That's why you get at Nielsen IQ, you're always presenting, I would say, at higher levels. Maybe when I was very junior, I present to marketing managers for the company. Nowadays I get to present to APAC CEOs, etc. It's a very privilege because we get really invested in our people from the start. Again, you get to work with people all around the world. The great thing about working in Manila right now is that our teams are working across Singapore data, Thailand data, Indonesia data, the whole of Asia. We're really investing in Manila and giving people that exposure. And with that, that actually will give opportunities for a lot of our talents in Manila to eventually go overseas. Again, for myself, I had to move country to get regional exposure. Nowadays, with our investment in Manila and our Analytics and Insight Center, you can work across country, but based in Manila. And also, you get to work with great leaders. And again, we try to build leaders for the future. So again, hopefully this really ties in that it's a really long-term investment in terms of working at Nielsen IQ. And just have a couple of examples of why people work at Nielsen IQ. So I just start with the lady on the left, who is Risa, who works very closely with Poch. So again, you can say that she loves working with her co-workers. We really welcome new ideas, and we really try to drive innovative solutions. So again, this is a company where we really have a very open culture, where you can really, even from the start, we will listen to your ideas and many will be implemented. I mean, you can see myself, I highlight about how I believe we're constantly growing, whether it's our people, whether it's our customers, our own business, or even our own inclusive culture. And with that, I just want to share with you that actually last week, we had our Global People and Planet Day, where actually 30,000 people around the world at Nielsen IQ volunteered. They gave up their day to do volunteering in the community. So you can see examples here from India, the UK, Malaysia, Singapore, where people went out there and they worked with charities, they worked with social enterprises. And we are a company that, even though we really focus a lot on driving impact in terms of companies and our own business, we also try to drive impact in the organization. So again, this is not something that every company will do, but it's something we are very privileged that globally we will take a day off work to give back to the community. So, if you're not sold in now, you're just still debating, just ask yourself whether you think you have a passion for information and working with some of the biggest companies in the world. And if that's something that you're interested in, then just let us know. So with that, you can reach out to Kynes, who's our talent acquisition leader, or you can alternatively scan the QR code below. And with that, I just want to leave you with one quote, which is from W. Edwards Deming, which is, "Without data, you're just another person with an opinion." So I'll leave you that just to think about. And with that, I'll hand over back to Maria.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that very informative presentation. As a business person myself, I was particularly engaged when you explained and walked us through how complex data can be made into powerful stories. The market situation and fast-moving consumer goods and the retail landscape you've presented was also interesting, especially how the information you showed us confirmed the continuous increase in online shopping and how customers patronize shops, whether click or brick and mortar, online for convenience and value for money. This type of data is very helpful as entrepreneurs make their decisions, Perhaps after knowing how inflation drives the cost of goods and services and that the trend could continue increasing, they could decide to tighten their belts in the meantime. On the other hand, because of the surging popularity of shopping through online platforms, as shown by Poch earlier, business owners could take advantage by recalibrating their business models to include the presence online, proving how interesting stories may be drawn from sound data, and how having access to this kind of information is key to making better business decisions. In addition, because of Craig's presentation on careers in the field of data analytics, a lot of the young professionals in our audience today will surely examine themselves if they have what it takes to explore the exciting opportunities that await them in this field. Again, we thank you, Craig and Poch, for sharing your experience expertise with us today. So before we proceed with the Q&A part of the webinar, and to be able to refresh ourselves and take time off from all of that knowledge sharing, let us take a quick break for a few minutes. While doing so, you could also input into the Q&A button your questions for Craig and Poch. But to entertain us during this brief slowdown, here is the UP Pampanga Choral offering their rendition of Tagumpay Nating Lahat, immediately followed by the Titos Music, a homegrown band composed of alumni from the UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga, performing their very own single, Between. Enjoy!
Ako'y ng lumang hinirang kung saan matatagpuan ang bilis ng teles ng silangan, nagniningning sa buong kabuluhan. Taglay ko ang hiwala ng silangan at sa buong bayan o lungsod, maging timog, hilaga at kanluran, ang Pilipino ay namumukod. Sama-sama nating mabutin, pinakamat tayong nalikwin. At ang aking tagumpay, tagumpay ng aking lahi, tagumpay ng aking lipi, ang tanging minipili at hinahangad. Ang ako'y tagumpay natin lahat. Ako'y ay isang muling mahal sa aking nagtilang lumalim at sa sasama natin magsisipan. Sama-sama din natin ang iba't ibang galaw, isang patutunguhan, isang araw, isang kapuluan. Sama-sama nating abutin, pinakamat tayong nabigwin. Ang aking tagumpay, tagumpay ng aking lahi, tagumpay ng aking libing, ang aking hiningiti at hinahangad. Ang ako'y tagumpay natin lahat. Ang ako'y tagumpay natin lahat.
Nalasing sa dilim, kumapit sa patalim. Pipikit mga mata, sa dilim ay nabulag na. Sa bawat nakaw na tingin, bawat nakaw na halik, sa huli ang kapalit, habang buhay mong pagpikit. Tumatakbo, papalayo, hinahanap ang sarili sa saklob ng mga bituin. Mawawala, naglalaho. Nasaan ka na, aking bituin? Pinipilit ang sarili, talikuran ng kahapon, pero sa pagtalikod ko'y mga pinto'y nakakandado, mga daay nabubura, mga mata'y magang-maga, sa kakahanap ng kasagutan sa buhay kong walang-wala. Nasaan ka na, aking bituin?
Welcome back, dear audience. We've come to the Q&A part of our program. Recall that earlier you were told to make use of the Q&A button and the chat box should you have any questions for our speakers. To begin, let me read the first question from the Q&A button. What is your advice for small businessmen like me who are intimidated by the concept of data analytics? I would like to benefit from using data kasi, but I am worried that it will be hard for me to interpret or understand. This was sent anonymously, so I think this question is for Poch.
Okay, thank you for that question. So to answer, again, I'll just go back to the quote of Nielsen founder Arthur C. Nielsen. The price of light is less expensive than the price of darkness. So looking at data or using data to make decisions is relatively a small investment compared to deciding and acting on blindly. So katulad nung like how we demonstrated the role playing in explaining data a while ago. If you didn't have that data and you will just come into the picture and start your business, only to find out that you're in a market or probably in a store wherein no one will buy you because certain market situations, then the price of conducting or starting up your business blindly would actually cost more because you've already started building your infrastructure, your business model, and all that. Whereas, if you had an idea where to start, then you could have allocated your resources more efficiently. And that's just because you invested a bit on data. So I hope that answered the question for those that might be hesitant to use data in their business or even in their decision making.
Thank you, Poch, for that. I think that sufficiently answered the question. The next question, I think, should be for Craig. The question reads, as students of business and economics, are there specific areas of study like business statistics or econometrics that we should focus more on so we can eventually land a career in data analytics?
Thank you very much for your questions. So actually, I've seen quite a few questions around this in the chat about what do I need to study to get into Nielsen IQ or into data analytics. Yes, obviously, there could be some subjects such as, business data or consumer behavior or marketing, which could be helpful just so you can learn more about it. However, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a must. What I would say is that we have many people in our organization who have very diverse backgrounds in terms of their education, whether it be psychology, geography, computer science, history, etc. You can still succeed regardless of what your background is. So you don't necessarily have to, but obviously, from a personal perspective, the reason why I applied for Nielsen at the time was that actually I really enjoyed the consumer behavior module at my university. So that was something which went, oh, I actually like this. This is quite interesting, but I'm quite interested in terms of understanding what people buy and how to change it. But as I mentioned before, that was just my personal perspective. I know many people who fell in love with the role and organization because they had different backgrounds. I think one of the great things about working with regard to fast moving consumer goods is it's something which everyone can relate to. Reality is that we all drink beverages, we all eat snacks, some might have unhealthier, some might have healthier, but it's all dealing with brands and concepts. Everyone knows, supermarkets, everyone knows sari stores, everyone knows e-commerce, etc. So it's all relevant from that perspective. So I would just say that actually what we look more for are people who have that right mindset in terms of, you're willing to learn. You do have that analytical mindset and that creativity where you can transform data into actionable stories and insights.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I've received a lot of questions, so I think the participants now are very busy typing several questions. Some are related, so I'll just lump them together towards the end. But I've also received some interesting questions. For example, one is, can consumer data science analytics capture shifts in political climate to enable brands platforms to adapt accordingly and responsibly? Can it capture shifts in political climate?
In political timing, do you say, sorry?
Climate, yes.
Climate,
Like,
so climate, okay. Well, I guess that, you know, with regard to whether it's, you know, I saw other questions which were quite similar about can data analytics or can be used for multi things of other sectors. I think regardless of the sector, data is powering everything now in terms of making data-based decisions. That's what's happening now. Going back to that final quote I stated, everyone has an opinion now. You look at it on social media, everyone has now a voice for an opinion. However, you need data to make decisions. When you work with the biggest companies or even some of the smallest companies out there, there is so much fine margin between success and failure that having that information is so important. So again, when you talk to those leaders, CEOs, they want to have faith in terms of them making the right decision, and having data will be very important. So again, whether it's politics or whether it's you know computer science or whether it's sports, data is being used. You know, if you watch sports nowadays, if you watch soccer, for example, they wear sports tech on them so they can track, you know, when are they likely to be injured? When are they going to hit their best speed? When should I make a change? So even in things like that, data is being used more and more. So I would go back to what Poch said. If you don't have the data, you're at a big disadvantage. So, you know, when there is you know, political campaigns, they will be looking at the data probably every hour in terms of understanding people's sentiments and try to shift and how to react accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I think that would also answer the question if data analytics would be relevant in HR-related careers. Because as you've said, across any field, data analytics will be beneficial. Okay. This one is really interesting, and I'm going to address it to both of you, Craig and Poch. So the question reads, how does your typical day look like as data analysts? So probably you could walk them briefly. What happens within a day in Craig Uliston's or Poch Astra's life?
So probably Craig, you might want to start first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'd say that the average, so it's hard to say what a typical day is like, because I think one of the great things that working at Nielsen IQ as a data analyst is you get that diversity that you can work on everything. I think one of the things which really attracts people to Nielsen IQ is actually we have all the data. So if you work for a client, etc., you might just work on carbonated soft drinks or shampoo or e-commerce, etc. But at Nielsen IQ, you can really touch everything. Though if I had to try to simplify it for the average day, obviously there is a part of the role which is client facing. You might get a briefing from a client to say, look, I want you to analyze how can I drive double-digit growth in cola in convenience stores or something like that. They'll give you a business question, and then what you will do is you will analyze that data. You'll work with the client, try to identify what are the business issues, what are their key strategies, what do they want to get out of it. So there's that strategy side, and then from that, once you've diagnosed what the client is trying to get from the data, you then analyze the data. We have a breadth of data where you will start analyzing, well, what's happening in convenience stores, how does it compare to supermarkets and online, etc. You'll analyze how are they performing against their competitors, and you'll try to diagnose why things are happening, and then try to cultivate a story in terms of how that client can have impactful change. And then you'll create a deck, and then you'll create some content which you will then share back and present to that organization. So there's also that component where we're a bit like a teacher, or we're in that way that we tell companies how you are doing. So it's a real privilege to go to a CEO of a company and say you are doing good or you are doing bad, and this is how you can improve. Not many people within that organization would have that privilege, but we do, because we're trusted as independent consultants to go into companies and say, actually, we've analyzed all the data. We actually see everything. And what we can see is you need to change your strategy and do this or that. So that's kind of what I see. I don't know if Poch, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Actually, what Craig mentioned was also part of what I do, but probably a bit what differentiates my business unit is that I look after local and growing businesses in the Philippines. So I think the difference is for those who watches Game of Thrones, anyone who watches Game of Thrones here, probably you could just like holler up there. Okay, it seems like there's a handful. So I'm sure you've heard of this term, hand of the king, right? So my role in Nielsen is basically for the local clients, these local clients. I am like the hand of the king. They give me a chat. Okay, what do we need to look at, or what data we need to look at so we could win this, get here from point A to point B, or win over a certain competitor. So I go back to the drawing board. I knock on Craig's door. Hey, Craig, let's huddle up. What's the best attack here? And then I come back to that client and say, this is the best approach using data. And then from there on, step by step, they invest the data with us. But step by step, we are behind them, guiding them to like what Craig mentioned. Are they doing well? Are they doing fine? Are there headwinds along the way? Or should they have tried this alternative route? But all these correspondences, there's always data involved. Hence, it's a lot of collaboration. That's why I believe when we were invited here, it's me and Craig together, because there is the client-facing side, the consulting side, and also behind the scenes, which is we analyze the data and go back to the client. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you for sharing what your day looks like as data analyst, Craig and Poch. Another question, okay, I think this is COVID related. Do you believe that some businesses, particularly SMEs, will be able to recover from the major negative effects of COVID? Probably given the data that you already have, are you foreseeing some easing, or will this negative effects of COVID linger? Anyone may answer. Though probably based from your presentation, I'll ask this to Poch.
Okay, thank you for that. Probably Craig, you may wanna feel free to add to this. So again, it goes back to the case-to-case basis on what type of business are you actually putting up or pushing to the market. So for example, back before the pandemic, alcohol or disinfectant alcohol is relatively a flat growing category. Nothing really bothers to buy alcohol. But when the first lockdown came in around March of 2020, alcohol prices soared sky high. It's like liquid gold. And those and how did it impacted companies? The bigger companies actually grew double-digit or probably triple-digit percentages at some point. But local players started to come in because it's easy to produce alcohol. You could actually do it in your backyard. You just have to make sure that it's 70% isopropyl, so a matter of chemistry. And then you can sell it to the market. And since local players would usually position themselves as price competitive to mainstream players, then they get a capture of the demand. But that is, again, on the advent, on the premise of the situation. So to answer the question, yes, businesses will have the ability or the capability to grow. It's just a matter of understanding, and that's again going back to data. What is your consumer today? How do we think based on data, consumers will actually consume the product? Will there be a demand? And then if we have this information and we have an understanding of how we can position ourselves versus competition, then we can actually ensures sustainability of that business from an SME standpoint.
I think just to add on to Poch, I totally agree with what he's saying. I think, often when there are benefits to being actually a small enterprise, is that often you can act quicker, you probably have less bureaucracy, you can innovate to the local needs, etc. And obviously with the rise in e-commerce, etc., distribution to reaching wider consumers is now easier than it ever was. So actually, from the Nielsen IQ data, we do see very healthy growth from smaller players, actually. Consumers want variety, they want choice, etc. They want to support local businesses and things like that. So again, having access to understanding the landscape where there is an opportunity is one of the great things. I think one of the key insights we're seeing across Nielsen IQ at the moment is consumer health is really booming. This is a long-term benefit. If you're working in anything which is linking towards helping people on that consumer health, everyday health, essentially, you have a good chance to win in the market. If your product is not healthy, think about how you can innovate to make it healthier, because that is going to be the growing trend because of legislation, because of the last few years, people are now more and more in tune with the importance to have healthier living, healthier diets, whether it's I now know that I need to have vitamin C or vitamin D. I need to track my health along the way, etc. These are long-term implications of COVID. And if you look at what's going to happen, if you go back in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, you're gonna have shampoo which gives you vitamin C and stuff like that. It's just the reality of what's going to happen. You're gonna have your coffee is probably going to build up your immunity, and because that's just going to be the norm in terms of how things are. So again, but the companies who have data will be the ones who will have the advantage, because they'll be the ones who move quicker and have that first mover advantage.
Okay, thank you, Poch and Craig. I'll just ask a few of the career-related questions. Like one, do you accept interns? Two, do you accept fresh graduates whose degree is not related to data analytics? And three, the other one, do you accept part-time and online work? And there's another one, internship programs, yes. Or do you accept not fresh graduates, but they had different career, but they'd like to shift careers into data analytics?
Okay, so the answers are yes, depends, yes. So yes, so we do have internships. So yeah, and it doesn't, and we accept graduates and people who are not necessarily fresh graduates. I guess the one which depends was that part-time and online. I think that generally we do prefer to hire full-time staff at the moment. They could, but we wouldn't discourage anyone from applying, but just specify that you're looking for part-time work, and there might be opportunities. And again, with COVID, that has taught us that we can accept remote working, but obviously our preference are people who are around the vicinity of the Metro Manila area, because we do believe that coming to the office is good, and for engagement, etc. And so essentially, yes, it depends, but always just reach out to us and we can see what can happen. Okay.
All right, thank you, Craig. So to those who raised those questions, you just received a lot of yeses from the Regional Executive Director of Nielsen, Craig Hewliston. But just to clarify, I forgot to include this earlier. You're not particular with the degree, correct?
No. So you can have any, like I said, you can have any degree. I think that again, when we're looking at, because we look at CV, we're not really looking at like, does this person have a business degree, or does this person have like a science degree, etc. But that doesn't really matter. Actually, one of the first things we do is we have a lot of videos where we get people to present themselves, share their story, talk about their passions. Those are things we're looking for first. And then obviously, then you go through some more case study and data analysis practice where we can learn more about your other skills. So again, I think just want to reiterate, it doesn't matter your background in terms of what you studied, etc. So again, I've throughout my career, I've known some of those analytical people I've worked with do not have anything related in their careers. And even if you're not the most, I'm not the most analytical person. I'm not. Like I can't, like I never thought to myself I would love working with numbers, and many times I don't love working with numbers. Okay, but what I do enjoy doing is I like to look at data, and I like to go to clients and tell them how they can grow their business. And I love creating stories, and I love presenting. And even if you don't love that part of a job, there are other parts of the jobs that you can do. There are some people who prefer just being more back end and working on data. There's some people who love, like Poch loves meeting clients, talking to them, presenting, etc. There's a variety of things that you can do based on your skill sets. And no matter where your areas of development are, Nielsen IQ will get behind you and support you.
Okay, thank you, Craig. So unfortunately, because we are pressed for time, and although we receive a lot of questions, the majority of them we've already answered, but there is one brave participant who has raised a hand to be allowed to talk. Her name is Jennifer Chung, and maybe she'd like to ask the question herself. Jennifer, you're allowed to talk. You are on mute, however. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Jennifer Chung.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just concerned with my question. Can I ask question in the Q&A or chat? I cannot. I'm disabled in my chat and Q&A.
Since you're already given the opportunity to talk, Ms. Jennifer, I'd rather that you raise the question now.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, Ms. Jennifer, go ahead. You're audible.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to ask question if this data analytics now, how this can help in our economy today. Those information we had. Hello? How this data analytics for business can help in our economy problems for today? Hello?
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
po, they've heard you, Ms. Jennifer. So was that the question? How can
Yes, po.
data analytics be used to address some of the
Problems in our economy
in our
nowadays.
economy today? Okay.
Yes, po.
Sige po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Would like to answer?
Okay, probably I'll answer first. And
Okay, thank you, Poch.
okay, thank you, Ms. Jennifer, for that question. So to answer your question, yes, yes and no. So yes, because as everything here in this world always boil down to a choice, right? And a blinded choice actually leads to a disaster. So put that in an economical context, an economical decision made blindly without supporting data will actually lead to something catastrophic. So that's the power of the data. So data analytics, on the other hand, even beyond Nielsen, governments, other organizations also look into this. So for example, I have some clients that actually do not ask for let's say how a product performs, but actually ask the spending capabilities of consumers in a national scale, and that's what we provide them. And the result of that is that information they use, so they could provide to areas which is incapable of spending for basic essentials to actually be enabled to buy or to have the ability to buy consumer goods, that even if they are financially constrained. So again, going back on the slide a while ago that we shared, that we through data we understand the different motivations of people this 2022. manufacturers or even organizations can actually use that to devise a plan or to devise strategies that could actually cater to the limited or to the resources of each consumers who has that motivation. And ultimately, that can actually impact how our economy is performing. So even at a very simple survey to understand that should how people would probably see increase in taxes this time, that could actually give a government or a body some gauge of judgment. Should this kind of law be passed, or should this be parked, or should be studied further? So again, that's the yes part. And again, the no part is data is just like any other weapon. It's a very powerful tool, but it will actually depend on who yields it or who wields it. So if it's not used for the good and it's used for the bad, then I would say the consequences would also be bad. So I hope I was able to enlighten on that question. Craig, feel free to add.
No, I think you answered it perfectly.
Okay,
I
thank you.
agree. Thank you, Poch.
Thank
For
you.
the last question, so sadly, we will not be able to accommodate a few of the questions raised due to limited time. So the last question reads, does Nielsen IQ offer services to MSME too, or is it just for big conglomerates? And I think related to this is the question asking if the payment is a one-time thing or is it a subscription base? Do you like provide a portal or something to your to subscribers, if that's how you call them?
Wow, probably I'll answer that, given that it's my it's
Okay,
in my
Poch.
front. So thank you for that question. So it depends. So number one, yes, we help not only the big clients, even the small clients and even small businesses, growing businesses. We help them. So it depends also on the requirement. If, for example, companies might want a tracking study wherein they regularly want to be updated, then that's a subscription base. But sometimes it's a one-off thing, like most of our small partners or small clients, wherein they just want to have a sense of the lay of the land, and then they will work on some businesses, strategies and actions, and then, probably at some point they will check the lay of the land again. So it actually depends on what you might need and what we can understand you will need. So the combinations are limitless. And yes, all the more we want to help smaller and growing businesses. In fact, my business unit heads that department, heads that objective.
Okay. So thank you, Poch, and thank you, Craig, for that very interactive Q&A part of our webinar. In behalf of UP, we thank you for making this growing interest in data analytics more digestible for small business owners and young aspiring professionals who would eventually want to land a career in this field in data analytics. Okay, so at this point, the link to the feedback form is shared with you through the chat box and may be seen on your screens, given the QR code that you're seeing now. We will appreciate it if you could let us know how well we have met your expectations in presenting this webinar. Your insight is of huge importance to us, and your feedback will greatly assist us to do better in staging webinars in the future. Lastly, and in closing, to give us a brief synthesis of the previous topics shared with us today, please welcome the coordinator of our Business Economics program, Dr. Patrick De Leon. Dr. De Leon.
Thank you, Prof. Ness. We are fortunate to have been given presentations on data analytics for business by Nielsen IQ Regional Director Craig Hewliston and Associate Director Pocholo Castro. Their presentations focus primarily on how companies use data to make business decisions. and secondarily on the skills needed in order to establish a career in data analytics. The two gentlemen shared their company's vision of being a leading global information services company. We are impressed with their presence in more than 90 countries and more than 30,000 employees. Their understanding of consumers or clients and the retail landscape in bringing breakthrough insights is consistent with the theory of the consumer and the types of market that we learned from microeconomics. Let me end this brief synthesis by expressing my confidence on our business economics, business management, and applied psychology students and graduates. They have the analytical skills, communication skills, and passion for data and information required for a career in data analytics. Above all, they acquired from the University of the Philippines the value or principle of always putting honor before excellence. This, I believe, makes them a cut above the rest. Thank you. Back to you, Ma'am Ness.
Thank you for that summative take on the topic shared with us by our partners from Nielsen IQ, Dr. De Leon. May matching pa, no, na kaunting promotion of our students. The feedback, the link to the feedback form is already shared in the chat box. And then, sadly, no, friends, this is where we conclude this webinar. Again, on behalf of the UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga, the UP Diliman Extension Program in Olongapo, and our partners and co-presenters, Nielsen IQ Philippines, this has been your moderator, Maria Eunice Felix, thanking you all for a wonderful and well-spent afternoon. Dakala salamat. Thank you, everyone, and we hope you could join us in our future webinars at UP Depo. Thank you. May we ask Mr. Craig Hilliston and Mr. Poch Castro to stay for a brief picture taking.